I'll begin. Well, first off, I want to remind everybody this is a creation for education. We would like to start teaching young people. I know a lot of you know all this information already. And part of our dilemma is to create a curriculum that can be understood by younger minds that haven't spent the years of study that many of you have. And I'm going to screen share one of a sample lessons on contemplative education, which is what this basic system is going to be, to give you a little bit of idea of a more simplified version of what Shiv just shared with us. So I'm going to screen share now. Uh-oh, you need to enable my screen sharing.
Oh, sorry. I should get out of my screen share. I have to enable your screen share. Yeah. How do I do that? Participants. Okay, where is Robyn? There is Robyn.
Yeah.
I've done it, Robyn. You should be able to do it.
Okay.
Robyn can do it now?
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, Robyn, you're on. You can share your screen.
All right. So again, this is one of 6 sample lessons that we've created. We're reaching toward the grade 4 to 6 because that's what we've been told is good when you're making a proposal for acceptance into any kind of a program. So I'll let you do the reading. I'm not going to read it for you, but basically the concept that she was talking about, the mechanical way that we live from day to day, we get up, we eat, we, feed our children, we go to work. There's not a lot of thought involved in that. And all we do is what is in front of us without really thinking about it. We react to life versus being proactive, like right down here. Whereas a contemplative education is one that will help us to be fully aware of everything around us and how intricately connected we are by quieting our automatic mechanical life forces and tuning into that which connects us within. And interestingly enough, this theory has been out there for years and years. I mean, there's a very famous scientist called David Bohm that was born right before the Depression. He had a terrible life growing up, and he always was asking why. Why is life like this? And he went through, basic physics. He actually worked with Oppenheimer. He worked with Einstein and got all involved in those types of traditional physics. But he kept saying, why? Why is this? Why is that? And he kind of gained the reputation of being a black sheep because he was always pushing the envelope. But during his discussion, he realized that, you can't just look at the world through this little box with your glasses on or your blinders like they put on horses. You have to be aware of everything. And he started doing testing on electrons. And he found out that when you are testing electrons and you make changes in your testing, the electrons somehow sense you've changed the parameters and they react differently. It's almost as though they were being affected by what you were doing to them. There was some almost mental activity in this subatomic particle that actually drew quite a bit of controversy, and it was called the double split experiment. They split 2 electrons and watched how they behave, and then they recorded what they behaved. They created these wave patterns, and then they decided they were going to measure the wave patterns, and all of a sudden the electrons didn't behave in the same way. And he started thinking, what is making these electrons behave differently based on their environment? And he was always in the contemplative worldview. He was always looking for answers and looking for the difference between the conscious level of being and the basic instincts that she was talking about, where you just kind of take care of your physical needs and you're not aware of anything else. And being aware definitely affects the way we interact with everything around us. And those skills need to be taught to our young people. And I won't finish this whole presentation, but basically, I think that's what she was trying to say in a nutshell. We need to teach young people how to be aware of the miraculous cells inside them that have this spiritual force they're not even aware of. And the contemplative course involves physics, it involves biology, it involves spiritual contemplation. I mean, it's a whole package. It's not like a class in history, a class in biology. It's going to be more taught with a whole perspective of life, which connects everything. So that's basically it. So I'll share more later.
Awesome. Thanks, Robyn. We also had a reflection from Bob. So Bob, maybe if I see that you're unmuted, so if you wanted to share your reflections, and then we'll move on to the broader discussion.
Shiv mentioned this book earlier and kind of disparaged it, and saying that it was difficult. Now, I think Shiv was being too modest. I mean, I wouldn't say it's exactly a beach read, but it's certainly intelligible, and whatever effort one has to put into reading the book is well worth it. I mean, in terms of a sort of in-depth treatment of the basis for this proposal, I mean, I think this book does that very well. So if you haven't read it, I would urge you all to read it. And there are two words in particular that I would like to focus on that come up repeatedly in the book, including in the chapter titles, and have come up repeatedly this morning. And those two words are wisdom and science. Now, Shiv once said to me that you should look at your tradition as not as a faith tradition, but as a wisdom tradition. And I think if we look at our religious traditions as wisdom traditions, we don't have the same problems with division. I mean, I think wisdom is something that can be found in many places, not only in one's own tradition. If you find wisdom in another tradition, you're not contradicting your own tradition. And as Shiv pointed out earlier, and as he demonstrates very well in the book, when you get down to the deepest wisdom of each tradition, they really converge. They're the same. They which is sort of the ultimate oneness of everything, and that is, and it's not only. I mean, the book talks about the Abrahamic traditions and the Vedic traditions and Taoist traditions, but also scientific wisdom of of the modern world, that all of those ultimately converge. So kind of that to me was a basic message. In terms of the word science, I mean, again, we think of science as something that deals with the physical world, whether it's the physical sciences that deal with sort of the inanimate matter, or the biological sciences that deal with light, but deal with it in a way that doesn't kind of incorporate consciousness into their treatment of it. But again, I think what Shiv demonstrates in the book, and I think what's key to this, is that there is also a spiritual science, that just because one is talking about spirituality doesn't mean that it's any less rigorous, that it's any less sort of based on reason and logic than talking about molecules or talking about galaxies. That science can be approached in a way that that incorporates spiritual wisdom, and similarly spiritual matters can be approached in a way that incorporates the insights of science. And again, that's what I derived from this book. There's much else in it, and I would recommend it to everybody.
Great. Thanks so much, Bob. That was a really deep and insightful reflection. And for those of us like me who are very early learners in this journey and have tried myself to read the book and have had the privilege of having like tutoring sessions every week, kind of with Thayaji being like a philosopher or like a tutor or a teacher that's guiding me through the readings. Both Robyn and Bob, the way that you've distilled some of the messages that Thayaji has shared is really helpful. I am pleased to say that we are somehow ahead of schedule, which for those of you who have joined Shen ever know that is a challenge that we often face. And so I think that the online world has provided us an opportunity to have more time than we anticipated for discussion, which is really great. And so at this point, we kind of wanted to open it up to all of you for your insights and your questions or comments on what you've heard thus far, different questions that you might ask us to interrogate, things that you think are missing or things that you think could be strengthened would be really helpful. Again, this is one of 4 sessions. And so we will be continuing the conversation and getting into the, Thayaji discussed the Vedas and the Humboldt curriculum, for example, and we will be getting into that more deeply as the sessions move forward. But for now, just as a start, wanted to get a sense from you on what you're hearing and what you'd like to see. So at this point, feel free to unmute yourselves, use the raise hand function or raise your own hand if you're able, and we can get the questions started. Amy, I see you first.
Might as well jump in, huh?
Yeah.
I did want to address a couple of things. With one of them I spoke about already in our breakout session. Shiv was talking about the eyes of the mind and of the body. And I wanted to bring out about the word eyes of the body, something that has come to me in intuition, contemplation, meditation, that perhaps for the children's sake that are coming on, an easier way for them to understand it, which is our goal. And that is the word radar. And I would like to explain my idea there in this way. If you were walking in your garden one morning, and or a garden, and you heard a sound, and then you recognize the sound. The sound is a bee. Okay. How did that occur? You didn't see the bee with your physical eyes yet. You just heard the sound. There is in our extended eyes, if you will, a radar of the ears. And the radar goes out and captures this, brings it back to the mind, which has stored the word and the image and the being of the bee. And then we walk around the corner and we see the bee with our physical eyes. Or as I was walking my dog this morning, I heard crickets. I knew that they were crickets, although I didn't even see them with my eyes because of this radar of the ears. Same thing we could say about the sense of smell. We're walking in the garden and we smell something. What is it? Oh, that's a rose. Rose smell. And I walk around the corner and there's a rose bush. And I was right. I brought the radar of my nose back to my mind where I had stored the scent of the rose. Even I had stored a picture of what a rose looks like. Of course, we have to have that training first to train the physical senses. The radar goes out. The radar goes out of our body when we see something also, something that might be fearful to us in the moment. And we bring that radar back with our eyes. Oh, that person doesn't look so good. Well, what do I mean by that? I have associated that person image of something like that before in the storehouse of my memory in my mind. And that is using the current eye, you know, the eyes of this instant, this moment, and then bringing back that radar and looking into this happens in a minute, this happens in a second, this judgment. You know, we aren't conscious of it. We just know it because we've experienced it before. So that was one thing I was going to say, if we could think about the eyes of the mind and also the eyes of the heart. And that rang a bell because many of our traditions do speak about, and it's even in the Bible, about the eyes of the heart. And that goes along with our feeling sense. And that is one more thing I just wanted to speak about. Shiv had this pyramid, a very nice pyramid there, which put the physical dimension on the bottom. I don't remember all the levels because I didn't write them down, but far up in there was the spiritual, you know, dimension. And I just want to point something out from my own studies of ancient wisdom traditions. For example, in the ancient Shinto tradition, they spoke about different orders of reality. The same thing is in the Kabbalah. You know, in the one I'm going to speak of, in the ancient traditions, was the spiritual dimension was active and present more than the intellectual dimension. And it was easier for those people to traverse through the realms. That's why we have so many prophets in that epic. That's why Hagar went out and spoke to God herself. That's why Miriam and Aaron were complaining that they weren't able to speak to God themselves anymore. Everybody was able to speak to God, and now just Moses. You know, the spiritual dimension, the picture, it's just like this. You know, we always see the changing of the food pyramid. You know, in our epic, first protein was the building block on the bottom. But as we get farther along, the new epic, children are going to see protein on the top. So we have to have more than one pyramid to bring forth the wisdom of these ancient traditions, that they actually were more engaged in the spiritual dimension than we are today, and that we're trying to integrate that, which includes nature, which includes the breath of nature, which includes being able to see through the eyes of a deer. You know, things that we want the children to experience. Wouldn't it be easier to see a pyramid next to the one we have that shows that it has changed, and can we integrate some of that in our reality today? Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Dayaji, over to you for a very short response. And then we've got 4 hands raised. We've got Andre, Deborah, I see William, Jacques, and both Williams, actually. So we've got a list going. So if I could ask everyone to try to keep their comments and their insights as concise as possible. But Amy, your insights were really appreciated in the chat function. I've seen lots of back and forth from folks, so thank you. Dayaji, over to you.
Briefly, Amy, when I talk of eyes of the body, I'm talking of physical, cognitive senses, which include ears, nose, mouth, skin, whatever have you, through whichever way we get the experience of the external world. The eyes of the body include the heart. I'm sorry. That's what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about the eyes of the mind, includes the heart. So I do not go into long enumeration, but I'm using those words metaphorically to include the different aspects that you were talking about. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Dayaji. Andre?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I represent All Paths Divinity School, and we're an interspiritual seminary. And also, I'm an artist. So I come to this issue of seeing from an artist's point of view. And there's a wonderful phrase that I came across by Adyashanti, which speaks of when you walk by a tree, understand that it's not you looking at a tree, it is the tree looking at itself through you. And that's a very different experience of seeing. And I think children would probably readily understand what that is, and they would have a very delightful interaction with things around them by understanding that they're not seeing something, they're allowing whatever's in front of them to be seen through them. So the thing they're looking at is actually itself looking at itself, which is very much the same idea of the mystic eye sees only God, no matter what the appearance of reality seems to be. Another thought, I won't be long, another thought is the difference between conscious and deliberate thinking and habitual thinking. Most people being unconscious of thought stream and of the chaos of thought stream are simply reacting to whatever thought stream is happening without entering that thought stream and stopping it and creating deliberate thought, which then creates personal reality. those are the few points I wanted to emphasize.
Thanks, Andre. Any comments, reflections on what Andre had to share?
No.
Okay. We'll move on. We'll move on to our next speaker on our speakers list. So we've got William Hicks, then William B., then Deborah, and then Anada.
Thank you, Garima, and thank you, Shiv, for all of this work that you all are doing. I sort of happened upon it. So for me, this is somewhat of an affirmation, if you will. I'd like to read you a little piece of something from a book that I wrote back in 2005. It's called Discipleship and Discipline. It's from the second edition of that book. This issue that Shiv is exploring and has been exploring for much longer than I have boils down in this way. What is truth? If we are to be dedicated to something, and this comes out of M. Scott Peck's book, The Road Less Traveled. If we are to be dedicated to something, we ought to know at least what that something is. We are encouraged by our Lord Jesus. If you continue in my word, then you are truly disciples of mine, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. The Hebrew word for truth is emeth, and it's characterized as a feminine noun signifying personification. That is, this is our role. This defines the content of our character. It means firmness, stability, sureness, faithfulness, continuance, enduring, trustworthy, steadfast, honest, and certain. Note that the Hebrew approach to the definition is as lists the characteristics of the attributes of the truth. This is a different approach as contrasted with the Greek way of defining a word. The Greek word for truth is aletheia. The Greek definition for this word is the unveiled reality lying at the basis of and agreeing with an appearance, the manifested, the veritable essence of matter. And what Shiv did earlier was to take us through that in a very detailed and comprehensive way, which kind of defines for me the interface between matter and spirit. And there's a bit of a section, I'm not going to read all of this in my book, that comes to the same kind of position and the proposal that Shiv and Shen is putting out. I find of great interest. One of the reasons or points of departure for that interest is that back in 2017, the Eli Lilly Foundation put out an initiative funded at the level of $24 million to transform the education of ministers coming out of the various seminaries around the nation. They made 24 $1 million grants to those seminaries in order to be able to address their training of ministers. I'm obviously of the tradition of being a disciple of Jesus Christ. So I was very curious, as to what were you going to do? What was one Lily's intent with that grant, that initiative? And then I contacted all of the seminaries and asked them, what are you going to do with this money? How is this going to manifest itself in terms of the way in which you approach training ministers of the gospel? The only response I got was from a dean of an Episcopalian seminary, which is a denomination within Christianity. I don't believe in denominations, mind you. And the first question out of his mouth to me was, are you an Episcopalian? And when I said no, he hung up. So for me, this kind of work here, creating a bridge, if you will, opening up is probably better. An opportunity for us to begin to start to get at the very deepest part of that which we seek is really important. And I'm thankful to be a part of this whole seminar. Thank you.
Thanks, William. Any reflections on what William's shared?
Okay.
Robyn?
I couldn't help but chuckle with your "Are you an Episcopalian" experience. I had that experience as well. And, you know, I was already Christian, and I thought, well, what difference does it make, you know? And that's exactly why I wrote my books on different faith practices. And anyway, so I just wanted to commiserate with you. I don't believe in denominations either. So anyway, thanks for your
Yeah. Thanks, William. Thanks, Robyn. William Binkies. Yep.
Hi.
Perfect.
First of all, I think we're doing this project is wonderful. That's the first thing. I do want to explore the law of unintended consequences. So it's a question. Emmy left, but I was going to ask her. When we introduce children to the concepts of what's ineffable, are we leaving them vulnerable because they don't have the capacity to discern what they're experiencing? And let me put this in more concrete terms. When I was a boy, and if I was 4 years old and I sensed that there was a monster in the closet, okay, that's not necessarily a monster in the closet, but it's my radar, as Emmy said, sensing some presence there. I'd run into my parents' room and I'd say, there's a monster in the closet. My father would bring me back into the room, open the closet door, say, there's nothing here, go back to bed, and leave me at that. What we seem to be doing now is to saying, yes, we can acknowledge that there's a monster in the closet, let's talk about it. Now my question becomes, who is there in this day and age who can guide that child through the experience of what's in the closet? And you know, I know some shaman who's out in Arizona, and when there was a problem in someone's house, the shaman would get called, and the shaman would introduce the children to the presence and teach the children they needn't fear it. But that shaman had an expertise. Because of eons of neglect of our own spiritual, our own sensitivity to these kinds of things, the vast majority of parents are not going to know how to deal with the monster in the closet when the child runs in the room. So I was going to ask Emmy, how are we going to deal with children if we are now going to start to say, yes, let's talk about the monster in the closet? And I know it's not a monster in the closet, but I just need to use that terminology. So that's a question for the panel, really.
Can I make a quick comment here in that context? There's a TED Talk by a gentleman named Sugata Mitra.
M-I-T-A?
M-I-T-R-A. Sugata Mitra. He did some work, and I think the title of the work is called The School in the Cloud. And he did some work about introducing a different way of educating children. And he did these experiments in India, and I think in and around New Delhi, and then out in rural areas, where he simply put a computer at those children. And these are children between the ages of 5 and 12 or 13. He didn't tell them anything about it. He didn't tell them how to use it. But he just gave them that piece of equipment and then left them. And when he came back, you know, they were completely versant with the technology. I'm saying that to suggest that maybe I thought the issue that you just raised, William, was you know, how do we, as I think I heard you say it, how do we, can we trust the children to engage with this kind of learning, and what happens when they become a bit more enlightened in the context of what they've learned? How do they handle it?
Well,
and I think
the parents, that's what I'm talking about. So
okay. Well, you know, Sugata Mitra's perspective in that regard was he found out that the children were much more capable, not only of engaging the technology, but integrating the information and knowledge that they got from or through that means than anyone had thought that they could be. And I would, you know, recommend that particular TED Talk, he has several out there, but that particular one I think is it opened my eyes at any rate to the notion of that. And he did that. There was this thought that when he did that experiment, and he's published research on this, that everybody said, oh, well, while you were not looking, your research associates and your students went out and helped those kids, you know, to engage. And he said, okay, if that's the case, let's put the same model out into a rural area at the base of a tree, and let's do the same thing. You know, the kids are going to come, they're going to be curious, they're going to say, you know, what are you doing? And his whole thing was to say, I have nothing to say, but here it is. And when he came back to see how they had progressed, they were into, you know, analyzing ribonucleic acid and DNA. And they simply had no prior preparation for that. So that, I think, is something that, in terms of, yeah, and I guess, William, your sense is, how do we engage especially young people to be able to understand contemplative education? I think we can trust them, and that's my message in this context. But you might want to look at that that TED talk from Sugata Mitra. That was really very enlightening for me.
Well, if we assume that the children have the capacity, now let's go to the next level. The child comes home from school and tells mom and dad what he or she believes. Do mom and dad take that child to get an exorcism, you know, with the priest? I mean, what happens at that level? Because the parents are going to be blown away by what the kid is light years ahead of where they may be in terms of their own awareness. So I think these are some of the, I like what we're doing, but I want to talk about some of the challenges that confront us, so that we don't, because the law of unintended consequences means inevitably that someone down the road is going to ask the same question I am now. And you can't go, I don't know. So maybe we need to bang that around too.
A good question. Something for us to keep in mind, and as a group interrogate in future sessions and in many discussions to come. Milt, I see your hand, and I think you've got a hot pursuit. And then we'll move on to Deborah's question, and then Anada's question.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to pick up on what Robyn put in the chat box there, that psychology teaches us that if you observe your thoughts and feelings, it actually changes those thoughts and feelings, and you decide what those changes will be. And I am working on this, and in fact working on another book now that probably will be titled Awakening and Already Knowing. And it comes from working with children and presenting them, reconnecting them with nature in a way by presenting to them what are the attributes of a living system and what is all life endowed with. And if I have kids for just one class period or less, I've done this like in a half hour with some of them, and taught with them the fundamental differences between those of us in a culture that doesn't connect deeply with the earth and doesn't seem to learn from nature, and those teachings from people who do connect with life and connect with nature. And this is what a living system is all about. That in that one class period, they will make a paradigm shift from who they are being today, which is fundamentally about social action and that sort of thing, because that's what the highest order of meme in our culture is, to making a paradigm shift to saying, when I grow up and I go out into the world, what I want to focus on is life, is bringing life and connecting with it. So I would say that the fundamental problem that we're dealing with in having this education at all occurred probably 4,000 to 6,000 years ago when we disconnected from the earth. And as you know, over thousands of years, then our conscious, subconscious, whatever we want to talk about is really covered over with not understanding life, not learning from nature. So once again, presenting in less than an hour to kids 5th grade through high school, they physically embody it and they play it back to you as a paradigm shift, and recognizing not only the paradigm shift in themselves, but the paradigm shift that we need to make as a culture is that we understand what it is to think organically instead of mechanistically, and to recognize abundance not as being that you take and take and take, but that the earth will always provide as long as you meet your responsibilities. And I am agreeing with Robyn's comment here. What we need to do is awaken this in the children, and they will make the right decision in their life. And probably what will happen is that the religious teachings today and some of the religious teachings that we're actually talking about here will get in the way of them making a wise decision. Thank you.
Deborah, over to you for your question.
Hi, everybody. It's more of a collection of comments, but there's always questions in there as well. I wanted to thank Robyn for the invitation, first of all, to today. Thank you for remembering that I'm out here. Sometimes I forget. And I wanted to say hello to Andre. I had the pleasure of meeting you and dancing with you in your workshop that you and Debbie put on at the NAIN conference where I met Robyn. So just wanted to acknowledge that I see you. And oh boy, I've been teaching through my program called Spiritual Diversity in Education in the schools for about 25 years. And doing exactly what we're all talking about today is looking for ways to teach and bridge the seeming gaps between the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual natures of the human being, and introducing this conversation of spirituality into mainstream education so that we make sure that the leaders realize that there's a whole other aspect of being human that we have not been able to infuse into our day-to-day education in the system. And responding to the concerns about the delicate nature of this, absolutely. It takes great skill to be able to transverse the unlimited belief systems within each individual. And how do we keep steadfast what belief systems are meant to be intact by the nature of that person's choice and or familiar constructs if they're still within that paradigm, and yet offering another access to something that's not taught, and that would be the subtle energies. That would be what is true and invisible, even though perhaps well, in our culture, what's not seen sometimes is not real. And one of the things I teach is sometimes what we can't see is more real than what we do see. And then I'll have conversations about the space between matter. And I'll point to a table and say, we used to think this was solid, but we now know it is not. And then I'll have conversations about what I believe, what holds it all together, that invisible molecule is love, which of course we're trying to define in the labs now as well. You know, it's and both. It's not an either or. It's organics and mechanics. It's the all of it. And I mean, I'll talk to kids about the trees and one of the things that I'm working on right now is bridging what we're calling in education trauma-informed care, which goes into resiliency and looking at it from a very mechanical, biological standpoint, that the central nervous system will have reactions to trauma, whether it's a mental trauma, a physical trauma, spiritual or emotional trauma. And then I'll talk about resilience in all organisms, like a blade of grass has resiliency. So I'm finding ways to infuse all of the what I call integrated constructs that are coming in and being birthed, you know, inside of the educational system. So we're a lot farther along than we think we are. The parents, if they see their children are happy and whole, have more latitude for conversations that are outside of their belief systems, because really what we're all looking for is what Shiv said, is that peace of mind. You know, that's the ultimate goal, is to be at peace inside of ourselves and outside of ourselves. And this is another avenue. It's another tool to give people to understand who they are and how we relate to each other. Let's see, I went through and tried to color code my notes. You know, one of the things that's usually unpopular when I talk about it is that our social justice movements are so important and they're identity based. And there's something bigger than that that we still need to keep coming back to so that the same problems don't get recreated. And one of the things I'll teach sometimes is what is the nature of spirit and soul. And I'll stop in a minute because I could talk for an hour and then some. I'll say, so, you know, the question to us was, how do we make this practical? And so one of the things I did way in the beginning was I said, okay, here I am, you know, my identity physical is blonde, white, female. But if I unzipped my skin bag and I opened it up and I took the essence of me out, and I put it into a 6'7" male Aboriginal person, that body would still have the same essence. It's just in a different avatar suit. And even if they don't understand all of what I'm saying, it kind of opens up that explorative field that we're asking for in our work, you know, of the contemplation. And all of this, what needs to be taught is the idea of contemplation, and the skill set is what it takes to build the capacity to have the effort to keep reaching for that. And it's really interesting trying to infuse all this in math and English and science and history, but it's all connected, and there's always the ways. And then when I'm teaching about nature and the trees, just coming back to what was said, I'll take the kids out and I'll say, well, let's have you stand on this tree root to ground your energy in. So I'm taking the mechanic organic, and then I'll say, but we need to ask permission first, because this tree is a living being, and it's like stepping on someone's hand, you know, or grabbing someone's hand. You need to ask permission. That one gets me in trouble sometimes, because people can't think yet of reverence for something with a consciousness other than a human at this point. So those are just a few examples of how I've been working the last 25, 30 years to be teaching this in the schools, and I haven't gotten fired yet. I've been in a lot of trouble, but that's okay. And I'm looking forward to helping with concrete curriculum in addition to what I've shared with us today. So thanks, that's me.
Thanks, Deborah. You know, your work on trauma-informed curriculum and work, I think, would be really helpful, because that's something practically that a lot of educators and people that are at the front line of community work are dealing with. So if you've got materials to share, I think that would be helpful for people. Something, as I will speak as the resident young person in this group, I think that as we think of unifying, or the inherent oneness in all of us, at the same time, the thing that, or not the thing, sorry, I don't want to reduce it to the thing, but the issues that keep my generation awake and fighting is the systemic exploitation of not only natural resources, but of people, right? And so the systemic ways in which, even though the atoms and particles that make up me and somebody else may be the exact same, but it's the systems that treat us differently, and therefore our ability to even have the time and room mentally for contemplative education changes. And so this is something in my journey of learning. Again, I'm very early in my journey of learning about this, but it's something that I struggle with, and so would invite folks to think about how that interacts with what people like me who take to the streets often think about. I see that there's a hot pursuit from Deborah, but I don't want to lose the question from Another. So maybe like 30 seconds, Deborah, and
Yes,
then
just quickly, the 2 points that you mentioned. In education, I'm having this conversation about compartmentalizing. That is where we fall short in changing systemically, and I can talk about that at a later time. So just grab that word, the compartmentalizing. And then the second piece, trauma informed. Even though we've made progress, what they still don't understand is that an emotional or psychological wound can cause the same type of physical stimulus as a physical wound. So we're getting there. But thank you, guys.
No, thanks,
All right.
Deborah. And I see you've got hot pursuit. Can we keep it to 30 seconds? And then we'll go on to our next speaker. You're on mute. Let me unmute you.
On mute, yeah. Yep. Hello, Robyn. Nice to see you. To go back to your original work, I think it's absolutely wonderful, and I do believe that, you know, we are an audience of the converted, so we all have different perspectives, but basically we're really all a converted audience. And mine is a very pragmatic question, really. How do we? I think our children are not the issue. I think children are a tabula rasa to some extent, and they will rely on us, and they will also explore their own, and this is even from my own childhood. I remember that independently I came to a lot of conclusions myself without any input from adults, and it has served me very well. How do we get the teachers on board? I know, for example, one small thing that the local Catholic community, they had workshops where they brought in people to teach the teachers how to meditate so that they could take that into the schools and help the children to use that as a tool in education. And that's just one small example of what I'm concerned about. How do we, on a universal basis, get teachers on board? Do we have a mechanism whereby we can get into the colleges and so on, so that we can make this part of the curriculum for education of teachers, so that they take this as converted people into the schools?
Thanks, Anne. Diaji, I see you've got a hot pursuit. Can we actually get to our question from Another, and then I'll let you.
There's one from Andre too.
Oh, Andre's got a question? Okay.
Andre's got a hand up, and Anna.
I thought that was just from before.
So
let's go to our next question first, and then we might have to wrap up. So let's see how far we get. So, but Anne, I don't want to lose sight of your question. It's in the parking lot, and we'll respond to it.
Another, your question?
Oh, hello everyone. This is actually Aruna, and I had a few thoughts, but I don't know if we will have enough time to talk about it or not. I am a teacher. I was a teacher in India, and when we moved to Canada, I had to, from one culture to the other, I had to adjust my teaching issues and things that were supposed to be taught in school here, and I found a big difference in the approach of teaching about other cultures and all that. It was always about something that I found I had a lot of questions. Growing up in India, in our schools, I remember having stories about Jesus Christ, having stories about Muhammad, having stories about Native Indians, and as a young child who was in grade 2, 3, 4, we were getting exposed to so many different ideas. So, because there are few teachers here and we all have a question how to reach the children. So I think inculcating ideas and stories from different cultures of the world, that will probably open up the children's mind, because as an adult, we grow up with certain ideas and it's difficult to change ourselves. But exposing at a young age to different ideas is a much nicer way, as in our ancient culture, it was said that keep all your windows and doors open and let the sunshine come in. That meant that keep yourself open so that the wisdom from everyone, every culture can come in. Somehow we have to incorporate in our education system. And one of our ancient saying is, the world is a big family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. And that's the idea somehow we have to bring in our education system, not only in Canada, but all over the world, because this is the problem that if we understand our neighbor, we will be kind and compassionate, but then where the conflict comes in, that's what we have to figure out how to approach that. And that's about all I have to say. Thank you very much for your time.
Andre? Andre, are you there?
I think you might have, this might have been from his earlier question, Dayaj.
Okay, all right. I have a couple of sentences I want to say, maybe just one sentence. I think what we have to focus on is what we want to do. How to do it would be the next question. Right now, I think in this conference of 4 sessions, one of which is today, there'll be 3 more. And what we are considering is what we want to do and how to phrase it, and what will work in the proposal, what will not work, how to strengthen the proposal is what we are looking at. Yes, there'll be questions of how to get there. I think that we have to see after we know where we want to get and how to convince people that this is something worth doing. I think those are the major questions that we are looking at right now. We have the discipline of art, we have the discipline of animation. These days, we got all kinds of communication tools that we can mobilize to do what we want to do, to communicate what we want to communicate. There's so many communication possibilities these days with technology and everything else. But what is missing, I think we are not sure as to what we should do. And that is what we want to think of. We want to focus our mind on the proposal, essentially.
So with that and with our time, the reason why we've broken out this conference, which typically took place in Waterloo over the course of a weekend, over 2 days in person, is now broken out into 4 sessions online over Zoom. While COVID is keeping us apart, it does provide us, perhaps purposefully, to be more purposeful and reflective about what it is that we want. And so we've shared a link to the proposal to you all. It was shared via email yesterday. We can share it again. It's also in the group chat. But if folks could take some time to read through that proposal, and next week as we start to get more deeper into the content, the what and why, I think we'll start to explore those questions a little bit more. I've got a list down of people that are looking for the recording, so we will find a way to share that all with you. Dayaji, one last comment from you, and then we will get ready for our next session. And Robyn.
What I want to do is take you to a small trip to the website of the conference. This is our website, Spiritual Heritage Education Network, and spiritualeducation.org. That is the URL for the for the organization. And then you click on this thing called Next Conference, and you get here. This is the conference page of the website. And I want to bring to your attention this inspiring meditation that Fred read this morning. Okay, it is there. You can click on this menu item and read it and print it if you like. And then next one is the proposal to finalize. You click on this, and here is the proposal to finalize. Okay, you can print it, download it, save it on your computer, and think about it. And then there's a conference poster that we have here. You can download it and print it and put it in your neighborhood so that people can join us next week. And then we'll be posting on this thing, this menu item, the proceedings as we go along. Day 1 proceedings will be posted at day 1, and then day 2, day 3, day 4. Okay, here we have nothing posted as far as the proceedings of this conference is concerned, because the conference is just starting today. Okay, so, and I had one other thing to share, and where is that? Okay, there's some videos here. Okay, practically all the thoughts that we are going to share are there in our videos. Okay, this is a video about our work. It is there on YouTube, and I have embedded it here. You can click here and see what our work entails. And then we were talking about the spiritual science. You know, I'm looking for a name for it. One name that comes to my mind is holistic science. Another name that comes to my mind is the science of the humanities, and so on and so forth. And then there is a video on raising human consciousness. It's a systematic way of raising human consciousness, and which is science supported. And we can talk about that science later on, but that is what this video is about. And then there's a video about the instincts, natural instincts. Another video about the contemplation, goes into the guts of yoga. And the beauty of holistic science that we're talking about is we can talk about yoga in terms of spirituality. We can talk about yoga in the classical way of talking from the scripture, whether the scripture is the Bible or the Quran or the Vedas. And we can talk about yoga from the point of view of neurophysiology. Okay, I've got diagrams that are expressed in the spiritual terminology, and I've got diagrams which are also expressed in terms of our neurophysiology. So you can talk about it in scientific terms, or you can talk about it in spiritual terms. So here are your resources, and I wanted to take you through those resources, give you a little tour of it, so that if you want to have a look and come, you know, to know about our thoughts, then it is being shared here. And most of what is going to happen in the next 3 sessions is already here in maybe a slightly different format. And we'll be posting the proceedings of this conference as they are available. We are recording it, and the recording will be posted there. So
Okay.
anybody can see, download from YouTube if they want to be on YouTube and embedded in our thing. And thank you very much. I just wanted to share that before we disperse, because people can maybe use it this week.
Thanks, Sayaji. Final word to Robyn, and then I really appreciate everybody taking some extra time this morning.
Okay, I want to share my screen again really quick. All right, I just wanted to let you know that this, there's a 62-page document. It's actually a sample educational series of classes that a teacher might use that we've just kind of created. It's a series of 6 different courses, which obviously could be built upon during the classroom session on each. If anybody wants to look at it, again, this is just a sample. We're trying to get a feel for how we can share these sort of intense and detailed thoughts about physics and biology and, you know, microbiology and metaphysics and spirituality with a young mind. And so I've tried to make it clean and easy to understand, and I would love to share it with anybody who wants to look at it and give us their opinion on whether they think it is going to do the job. Now, granted, the teacher has to build on these slides, but it's a beginning. And if anybody wants it, feel free to ask, and you know, send your email and I will email it to you. So that's it. Thanks everybody for coming, and we love having your excitement and your input, and can't wait to see you next week.
Yep. So next week, we will reconvene on Sunday, October 4th at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Eastern Daylight Time.
Oh, Eastern Daylight Time. Sorry. Right. Eastern Daylight Time. Right. 10 a.m. for people in Toronto. Because Toronto, as they say, is the center of the universe. Or maybe Canadians at least, or only Torontonians say that. Thanks everyone for your time. We really appreciate it, and we hope to see you all soon. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye, all.
Take care.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Shiv.
Hey, thanks very much. Bye.